Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining in today for our fourth expert panel titled How to Create an Appreciation and the Need for Arts and Culture in Our Lives. For Conference Ideathon 2021, moderated by Mr. Arvind Singhal, who's also our mentor for the art and social behavior domain. And today we are also very happy to have two very prominent educationists, two very prominent academicians and researchers from very pioneering institutes, Mr. Professor Rajinder Dudrah and Professor Anchal Jain. Now, without any further ado, I will pass on the virtual microphone to Mr. Singhal to do the intros and set a context for today's panel. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Kaustubh. A very good afternoon to all of you. Indeed, a privilege and a delight for me to be moderating this particular session. It's a session of great interest and concern to me, and therefore at the time when the planning was being done for this series of panels, I almost forced myself my way into actually taking charge of this particular discussion here. The reason is that when we look at our society, and I'm talking in the context of India only at the moment, when you look into the society around us, it seems that we are a nation which has somehow lost the joy, delight, appreciation of some of the finer things in life. We seem to be perpetually angry, especially when you look into the youth of our country. We seem to have a very thin skin without actually having the ability to understand and appreciate each other's viewpoints. We think of leisure and entertainment in the very limited domain of a video on TikTok or otherwise, or maybe going to a shopping mall if there's a mall available to you. There's not much else in our life which can take away some of the challenges and stresses which we all have to face as humans, during the journey of our life. If we go back about 400 years ago, India's GDP, as we know, to the world, its contribution was nearly about 25% as it is told. Not so surprisingly, some of the finest things in our culture, which we are very proud of as in India, seem to have taken place mostly before the 17th century, so to say. Some of the most beautiful architecture in the country, which is temple architecture, the forts and palaces, some of the most wonderful forms of dance arts, performing arts, music forms. I mean, we name it. Some of the finest things in our lives used to happen, looks like, almost many hundred of years ago. And over these years, for whatever reasons, we have lost both the appreciation of some of the finer things in life, art and culture, and also somehow don't see a need as to why as a society we need to not only appreciate art and culture, also need to support it, also need to nurture it. And some of us who have a talent should actually confidently go out and practice it as well. They're not limited to just extracurricular activities at the school level. This appreciation has to commence literally from the time when the child is born, so to say, there, and it has to be enforced, it has to be reinforced throughout the journey of this human from the time he or she is born there. In this context, therefore, I have two wonderful panelists who have been practicing what I've just tried to put the context in. I would love to invite first Professor Rajinder Dudrah to share his perspective as to what is the role of art and culture in a society. Can the society's wealth be measured only in the economic terms? And what happens if a society somehow loses the ability to appreciate the art and culture? And then, of course, we will discuss later on what action steps we need to take to inculcate this appreciation and the need. Professor Dudrah, if you can take over from me now.
Thank you, Arvind. Thank you very much for that. Hello, everybody, wherever we're joining from. Good morning from the United Kingdom. Good morning from England. And obviously, it's a good afternoon in India. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conversation. So I'm to respond in two ways. the first way I want to respond to the importance of arts and culture is absolutely, of course, it's important that we have a growing and healthy economy. It's very important that we have a growing and healthy democracy and polity. And I think the first point I want to make is that central to that is the role of arts and culture, whether that's in terms of representation, so we get a sense of who we are as a diverse people, who we are in terms of our history, and who we are then in terms of our cultural identities and our humanity at large. And our humanity at large can be expressed quite clearly, quite visibly, sometimes also through challenges and contestation. But it's these processes that can allow us a conduit, a way into understanding our humanity and our humanity's place in our current society, culture, politics, and economic. So they're not divorced from the wider notion of society. Arts and culture is integral. And in fact, I would argue, as has others before me, that arts and culture is another way of documenting how well a given society in any given time and place is progressing. The second point I want to do is to move to the popular realm, the realm of the everyday. Arts and culture is around us every day. You just need to look around, for instance. So I don't know if you can see, but in the background, I've got some elephants, which I got from an arts and craft fair, handmade in India when I was there a few years ago. And that was something that I cherish as a kind of a link to, my ancestral homeland with India, but it also gives me a reminder of my joy of elephants, but also time of memory, that link to when I was there. So arts and culture is everywhere. We can also have a sense of arts and culture is sometimes only there in the museums. It's only there somehow for, you need some sort of higher skills or higher sense of understanding to make sense of it fully. Or you perhaps need to go to a sense of opera or high Sanskrit art. Now that absolutely is art and culture in its own right, but I'm very much interested in the arts and culture of the everyday. Why? Because that's a way of accessing many people in their millions. This is something that people do right the way from mass media, right the way through to films and new media as well. So arts and culture is all around us. It's also a way in which people that might somehow be left out, if you like, in the mainstream discourses or in the dominant representations of a society. So this is where then arts and culture of the everyday, in and through popular cultures, can be a way of opening out that access, being more inclusive. And it's also saying to the wider people that the resources that you are using every day, these are important resources as part of arts and culture, but are also very important for you to communicate who you are, for you to represent who you are, and for others to understand you better. And with that in mind, I'm just going to draw on two examples that I've been a part of many projects that I've been involved with over the years. So the first project, if we could have the first slide, please, Yadu. The first slide is of something that took place in 2007, back well over a decade ago, and in the good old days before lockdown, because we're currently in lockdown in England, where people actually met and came together in physical spaces. So we're all desperately looking forward to getting back to that day again. But this is in 2007. This is a project that I partnered with the National Science and Media Museum, and we had a summer-long event of Indian cinema celebration, popular Indian cinema, also known as Bollywood. This is when the IFAs, the International Indian Film Awards, came to the UK in 2007. It was part of the rise and the growth and the so-called discovery of Bollywood in the UK in the 2000s. And the IFAs had come and they partnered with the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford, which is in the north of England. And they invited me to co-curate an exhibition, an interactive exhibition, which wouldn't just be about kind of films and images, but a way of bringing on board people from the wider diaspora community, British South Asians, British Indians, in and around the northwest and Yorkshire, to come and engage with what Indian cinema meant for them. So here is an example of a very, very popular cultural form, Indian cinema, and popular Indian cinema at that. Something that some people might think of as time pass, 3 hours melodrama, it's a bit of kitsch, but actually there's a reason why millions of people, every week, every day, when the cinemas were open, would be going to watch these and downloading these films on the internet. Yes, of course, it's about entertainment. Yes, of course, it's about leisure, but it's also about representation. It's also about issues of gender. It's also about national identity. There's a whole host of range here, not least, of course, then stardom and celebrity and the wider paraphernalia that goes with that. So what we wanted to do with this exhibition was to make it engaging, was to put the popular at the very center of that, but we engaged with communities, we engaged with audiences, both young and old, so people right from school age, from their 11, 12, 13 onwards, even younger than that, right the way through to people in their 60s and 70s who'd come to Britain in the 50s and 60s and had memories of Indian cinema in the cinemas or in the home. And it was a way of us engaging into that sense of how arts and culture, through the example of popular Indian cinema, meant something for these communities. So it ran for just under 3 months, from June to September. It was attended by thousands of people. And what's interesting here is it was held at the National Science and Media Museum. So we had this big exhibition. It was a huge exhibition of films, memorabilia, ephemera, and film posters. But we also had the early technology. We had access to the early film cameras, circa 1900s, 1910, 1920s, that were actually used by people like D.G. Palki and others after them, where they filmed some of that early Indian cinema. So it was a lovely showcase of technology alongside arts and culture, alongside popular culture, but also showing that arts and culture and popular culture is not just kind of made in some sort of vacuum, it's also made and created at the intersections of technology. So there was very much a kind of an educational remit along that line as well. The website for the link is on the bottom of the slide, or if you just Google Celebrating Indian Cinema, there's more details of that. Could we have the second slide, please, for Creating Multilingualism, Yadu? Thank you very much. So this is the second project that it's literally just come to an end last year. It was extended by a year because of the COVID disruption in the UK, but this was Creative Multilingualism. It was a grant awarded by the Arts, Humanities and Research Council, one of the big funders for arts and humanities research in the UK. And this was led by the University of Oxford, and I was one of the co-investigators of that from Birmingham City University. And it had 7 strands. I led one of the strands, which was languages in the creative economy, which I'll just say a bit more about in a little while. But Creative Multilingualism at the time was one of the largest funded projects at that time. We managed to get just over £3.3 million for a 4-year project by the Arts and Humanities Council. So it took us about a year and a half to get it, but once we got it, it was like a 4 or 5 year long intervention into the role and importance of different and diverse languages, both in the UK and around the world, in terms of people's identities, in terms of education, why languages are perhaps dropping off at the school level, what this means if we let this go on for a generation. And so we wanted to make an intervention by showing how languages are multi. There are various languages, Western, non-European. So obviously I engaged with a range of artists. I think I worked with up to 20 artists in the end, from languages from Russian, right the way through to Yoruba, right the way through Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, and street languages as well. So this was Creative Multilingualism, and the web link is that. And the project that I led, can we have the next slide, please, was Slangwages, languages in the creative economy. So again, you can find more details of this on the Creative Multilingualism website, which is quite easily found by the web link, or if you just type it in your search engine. But as you can see here, and hopefully the image is coming across, so if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, we engaged with languages being important. Just look at the top 2 there, Black Lives Matter, something that happened that was very important, that had global resonance last year after the killing of George Floyd in the USA, had political reverberations. I worked with artists up and down the country and from Birmingham to think about what is the language of representation, what is the language of protest, what is the language of visibility around Black Lives Matter. So we really opened up the idea of languages, and we really engaged in through arts and culture in a very political moment. So arts and culture isn't just simply entertainment, isn't just simply dime pass. Actually, arts and culture can lead us to move the world, literally. And on the right-hand side of that still, you'll see some of the things that we got involved with. So we had an exhibition of Slangwages. We had a Russian play which we adapted through UK hip hop with some UK hip hop artists. We worked with various communities and various community language, Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, Yoruba, Pidgin, Yoruba sonnets, African music ensemble with languages. We had conferences and workshops, and we also created multilingual poetry there. I'm just going to finish by showing a video now and then kind of wrap it up. So this is a video of the exhibition launch, the Slanguages exhibition launch that we had at Wolfson College, University of Oxford. And what you'll see in this video is a range and diversity of voices and artists and different people coming together, celebrating the everyday, but also celebrating the range of languages through which they speak, express themselves, and engage with arts and culture. Could we please have that video?
I'm Rajinder Dudrah. I'm Professor of Cultural Studies and Creative Industries at Birmingham City University. So I'm the co-creator of Slanguages.
And we're here today at Slanguages. This is the first launch at Oxford University. It's going to tour the country.
And what we wanted to do with this exhibition was really bring to life languages, particularly West African languages, Pidgin, Creole, Patois, and urban sign languages as different forms of languages which don't get talked about or sometimes just overlooked or people don't know they exist. So this is a way of us bringing to life languages, but also languages with their artists and how artists are using these languages, making meaning from these languages, but also creating new genres, new artistic forms.
So I'm here at the exhibition today to represent the organisation I work for, Punch Records. So we're co-producing this exhibition, Slanguages, but also to learn basically what different languages there are, you know, the sign language, the urban, the patois, the pidgin, something that I never knew about.
I think language plays a big part in my work because I'm from Jamaica, like I said, and they speak patois over there, so I try to like hold on to that part of me and enforce that in my work as much as possible.
I've always studied languages because I wanted to know more about the world, and I felt that if you speak other people's languages, you can understand their cultures better. I mean, I'm really excited about the urban sign languages thing because I've never heard about such a thing before.
There's lots of different sign language varieties that you can use, and it's interesting actually. The urban signs that I use is actually very popular within ethnic minority communities. Unfortunately, their lack of representation in mainstream culture has led to the language not being recognised, but there are absolutely differences there.
I'm here today to support a project that I've been involved in from earlier on in the year, where we've been exploring languages, cultural identity, different ways of communication. A couple of dope artists involved, myself included, and I'm here just to support and get a feel for what's going on with the other artists and also present my work and my perspective on the subjects that we was talking about. Language is everything in my work. Language is everything in my life. For me, language is how we entertain ourselves, it's how we communicate, it's how we study, it's how we learn, it's how I express myself. So my work is definitely based on language as a spoken word artist, rapper, writer.
I love the way it's been presented. I think it's been a wonderful evening for me. I don't attend many of these evenings, but I have really enjoyed it.
And language is communication. Without language, I don't think we will be able to interact.
So hopefully there's something here for everyone from, if you like, school ages right the way through to people at university or non-specialists. I think it's also a great exhibition because it's a talking point around languages and the creative impetus and the creative importance of languages too.
Thank you, Yadav. Thank you very much for that. So just very signing off on there, hopefully you've got a sense of the importance of taking arts and culture into a range of environments, universities, community centres, the public at large, but also working in partnership with arts and cultural organisations to broaden out that remit and to bring on board as many different people as possible. Thank you. I'll pause there.
Thank you very much, Rajinder. You made some very interesting points, and I'll come back to you in our discussion. To me, the first point which you made, which appealed to me, and hopefully the society should understand, that art and culture is ubiquitous. It's all around us. It is not something which is bottled or housed into a museum, and therefore you make maybe once in a lifetime mandatory visit to, let's say, National Museum in Delhi or the Louvre in Paris and say, "Oh, I know what art and culture is all about." It's around us. It's every day around us. So you made a very interesting point there. You also made a very interesting point from my perspective that we are living into a creative economy, and therefore expressions of human ideas, the evolution of our society is in real time. There are multiple new forms and mediums which are emerging to express what you would broadly call as art and culture. And the third part was very important point, especially for a country like India. Arts and culture are probably a common strand, which can be much more inclusive for the society, because these are things which can touch the emotions and the hearts of just about every socio-economic, cultural, ethnic strata of the society. The talent exists everywhere and need not be constrained by the physical limitations of resources or otherwise. And in that sense, inclusivity, which everybody talks about, is a very important element to when you look into the context of art and culture. So, Anchal, would love to hear your take now in terms of our topic, and then we'll start our discussion. Over to you, Anchal.
Thank you, Arvind. Professor Dudrah has actually said a couple of things very, very important and pretty much that I wanted to cover as well, but I'll try to express in my words. Well, art is the highest form of hope. These are the words of Gerhard Richter, a German painter, and he used these words first time in 1982. Indeed, the place of art and culture in human endeavor and optimism is undeniable. No one can doubt that. But as Arvind pointed out, for the same reasons, it also ends up sitting at the top end of the human needs pyramid. For the longest time now, arts and culture has played a very insignificant role in our lives while we chase the economic candy. And I understand that. This, unfortunately, is reflected in the lack of importance we have granted to it. In our schooling system, exposure or interest in museum, and just being around arts and culture in our daily lives, as Rajinder also mentioned, it's around us, but we are not sensitive to it. And that sensitivity is, or lack of sensitivity, actually impacts our sense of aesthetics, which is rather pronounced in the sense that the lack of it rather, or lack of appreciation for aesthetics, which is perhaps all around us. Not only is the appreciation for arts and culture low, but even its role in our lives is not really understood. For me, the most unfortunate collateral damage is reflected in our uncertainty over our own identity as people and as individuals. So we find it much easier to define it with obvious labels, religion and caste, instead of a culture that actually cuts across such narrow boundaries. We have a tendency to think of our past as a la carte menu that we can simply pick and choose from while ignoring others that might be a little bit inconvenient. But we forget that it's always the complexity that makes the most beautiful symphonies. A single guitar will not make a symphony. There is no surprise then that we have had almost no presence of Indian cultural or creative brands in the world. A very small number that actually does not reach anywhere close to making a significant impact on the global consumer. As I've always been saying, the world is ready for us. The question is, are we? Culture has been defined as collective behavior patterns shaped by myths and imagined realities. I love this definition, personally, for it does not exclude the inconvenient truths, but instead, it opens us up to becoming more curious about the wonderful expressions of our culture and help shape our own narrative and vision for the world. I am, you are, unique in the world because of our roots, our unique cultural context. It is only when you marry this uniqueness with your own personal joys, your personal angst, that you will have something beautifully unique to share with the world. Indeed, it's this appreciation and embracing of culture that shapes our voice, that we can call art in all its manifestations. We are who we are because of our complex history, our unique culture, and its myriads of expressions in poetry, words, art, music, languages, food, dressing, architecture, and I could go on. But the first thing we would need to do is to get people to appreciate their own roots, just by becoming alive to the beauty of the everyday and everything past. So what next? Well, the good news is that the millennials and the Gen Z, and I'm talking about India, yeah, together contributing to now over 55% of our population, are now rapidly climbing the ladder of the needs. Increasing number amongst them are beginning to not just be curious, but also deeply interested in art and culture. This is the group we need to be addressing to help them build and serve a need for arts and culture in their lives. Now, since my area of passion is enabling creative entrepreneurs and businesses harness Indian culture, arts, and artisanal crafts in order to build healthy, sustainable brands that could go global, I can confidently assert that our soft power and our product service brands have a strong symbiotic relationship. We cannot ignore one or the other. A strong collaborative approach between the two will help develop, nurture, and flourish both our art and culture as well as the creative brands. For me, pure art forms and commerce need each other. And I would strongly recommend that our industry, the government, the small entrepreneurs, the cultural foundations need to all come together to formulate something that could be both scalable and deliverable. In fact, it's in this context that I find that the efforts made by Serendipity Arts are phenomenally laudable. I'm reminded of one of the most incredible French poets and philosophers from Martinique, French West Indies, Edouard Glissant, with whom I've had enormous fortune to spend time while he was still alive. He once said, "La frontière est cette invitation à goûter les différences." Translated, it means borders are an invitation to taste the differences. He goes on to say, there is no border we don't cross. Yes, we as people are naturally seduced by the differences in culture, arts, and its expressions. We celebrate them, which is why we cross borders. It's not just for commerce. Whether real or imaginary, we cross borders, like within our own country that houses countless incredible cultural forms. You know, when people are buying a product from India, they're buying into our culture. When people listen to our music, admire our paintings or architecture, they want to take away objects that celebrate them. So in my view, the first task is to bring art and culture to the millennials and Gen Z in a way they can consume them naturally and they're able to integrate in their daily lives. Only then they can feel close to their culture. I also have no doubt that it will also build enormous self-confidence and ability to see the world differently, to help build the beautiful creative brands that the whole world is really waiting for from India. This means that the arts and culture must speak the language they understand. It is not enough for the young to appreciate and understand traditional art and culture. It is equally vital that the reverse is true as well. Appreciation for tradition can only come when we engage abundantly with our art and culture in a more accessible form and language of delivery. Professor Dudrah talked about popular culture as being an integral part of art and our heritage as well. I couldn't agree more. Just exposure to art is not enough. Our emotions need to get triggered. Just as we as people climb the ladder of basic fundamental needs to more aesthetic appreciation, we need to now start the journey of appreciation from more contemporary renditions of traditional art forms in ways we can immerse ourselves emotionally, whether it be at museum or at a performing arena or simply at a neighborhood bar. Which brings me to the last point I wanted to make. While we must respect and protect traditional cultural forms in all their purity, we must recognize that tradition is always in an evolution. It's not frozen in time. It should not be, and we've got to keep it evolving to keep it relevant. There are hundreds of examples of modernity turning into tradition with passage of time. Once again, modern and traditional both need each other. There would be no rock and roll without swing. There would be no swing without jazz. Jazz would not exist without blues, which in turn was born from African call and response in the indigo and cotton fields. Where do we say, what is tradition in this? For me, each one is a traditional form and the cultural heritage of America. One of the most pervasive art forms, the Art Deco, was itself a pastiche of different traditional forms. Fauvism, Art Nouveau, Bauhaus, Ballet Russe. Such movements are essential to the growth of our culture and for the cultural brands that draw inspiration from it. Do we see any in India yet? Well, I'm 57 and I hope I will in my lifetime. Arvind, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Anchal. Lots of good takeaways from your opening remarks. I wish we had more time. To me, the most interesting was your opening statement itself that art is the highest form of hope. I fully agree with you. I can only add that art is also probably the ultimate way to satiate your body and soul. It engages all our senses. So it not only gives us hope, but if you can appreciate art in whichever form you appreciate it, it is the most soothing, the most satiating form of indulgence you can have. I'll already add to that great poet you talked about. You also made a very interesting point, which I wish becomes a common discourse in our country, in India, where our cultural identity is given much more importance than our ethnic or religious identities. Sadly speaking, it doesn't seem to be going in that direction. Nevertheless, no harm in making at least serious effort to do so. Having said so, to me, there is a lot of reasons to be optimistic. The very fact that we are having this panel discussion, with the very fact that there is a hackathon, which means engaging the ideas and minds of brilliant people from not only within India but from outside, to co-create this wonderful endeavor of a living art and culture center. A center which is not housing, sculpture or paintings which have been made X 100 years ago or X decades ago, but it's a living form to encourage people not only to create art, co-create art, but to appreciate art. Like this, I also feel very optimistic from our perspective, and I go back to my opening comments. You need patrons to support art and culture. When India was relatively wealthy some hundreds of years ago, that's where we had seen such wonderful forms of variety of arts. I see that happening in architecture. I mean, I'm 60, you are 57, Anchal. I thought I could never see good architecture in India. I'm so delighted to be proven wrong. Such brilliant young, not so young architects. And I think they are patrons who appreciate good design and good art architecture. Just as one example of doing so. And various other creative forms. Having said so, let me just open up it for our discussion amongst us more in terms of, we know the need now. We know how important it is for a society in various ways to support, encourage, inculcate an appreciation of art. The challenge is when you talked about Anchal, the Gen Z, the millennials, uh, unfortunately, a significant part of India, of this 55% people you talked about, is still basically struggling to survive. I'm talking about the basics, most basic parts of the Maslow's hierarchy about the survival there. The children are forced to only focus on academic studies so that they can do something to crack some examination. Parents do not see an appreciation that if the child has some natural abilities and capabilities or talent, why not support that, even though that may not help that person crack gate and crack it to IIM Ahmedabad like you did there. But there's life beyond that. Very quickly, before we open up to some questions from the audience, both to you, Rajinder, as well as to Anchal, can you just come up with some bullet points in terms of what we need to do, really speaking, to reach out to what I would use the word the mass of India, not masses in the sense of economic mass, but just the mass, to say that, look, there is life beyond an IIT or an IIM or a law or degree or whatever else. And you can be happy human being. May not be financially the most rich, but at least you can be happy, and that itself is the highest purpose of life, to be happiness. Rajinder, you may want to take up a couple of suggestions, and then Anchal.
Sure, thank you, Arvind. And some really nice salient points there from Anchal as well. Thank you both. Just two things then. The first thing I would say is let's look at our curricula right the way from, if you like, the primary, secondary to the tertiary level, at university level. So yes, we might be studying law degrees. Yes, we might be studying fixed discipline degrees within our subject areas. But actually, the world is changing. The education environment is changing, but we all alluded to, not least because of the digital media environment that we're in. So we can think flexibly, creatively and innovatively about the kinds of content that we are delivering on our courses. So for example, in India, are we just talking about, say, jurisprudence? Are we just talking about civil law, constitutional law, as important as that is, but can we also talk about media law, a huge growing area that people can get into, learn about the media, but also make a living as well? Could, as part of university degrees, as part of studying at school, alongside learning the cores of maths, English, science, all the arithmetics and history and so forth, can we also have creative subjects embedded in the curriculum? So for instance, let me just give you a quick example. One of the pressing issues of our day right now, amongst others, is perhaps the environment. Some people are talking about a global crisis. Some people, as we saw with the previous US president, and others were saying, actually, there's no such thing as global warming. It just happens naturally. Now, there is something that's live. There is something that obviously scientists can engage with straight away. But how do you take that message to the masses? How do you take that message to the millennials and Generation Z that Anchal referenced to, and that we're all engaging with as undergraduates and people who we meet in our various working lives? Could this be a way in which artists, could this be a way in which creatives, could this be a way in which media and policy wallahs, alongside scientists, all come together to think about how do we tackle some of these global and pressing issues? And can we use examples, genres, actual text specifics, instances from arts and culture more widely in which to engage and find solutions for that? So there's a way in which we make education more holistic, we make education hopefully more opening, and we think imaginatively and creatively about the kinds of curriculum that we're delivering, and then by in turn allowing young people, allowing more people to come on board. So just a couple of examples there, quick ones.
Arvind,
yeah, Anchal.
Very good question, though. First of all, for me, art and culture cannot be just an urban affair, high society affair. It can't be. Unless it's all pervasive, it's not really embracing our culture, our masses, as you talked about. For me, an expression and appreciation for arts and culture, it doesn't have to come in form of traditional expressions that we understand art to be, like a fine art painting or a sculpture or a beautiful architecture. It could simply be in form of graffitis. You know, art and an expression of from where you come, and your own voice and your own angst, your own joys, as you talk about, can be expressed in multiple ways. If people are given an opportunity, it can come and be expressed in multiple ways. You know, a gully boy, and it has spawned so much of inspiration across the country. Are we able to give such opportunities to such? I'm sure there is a lot of talent. There's a lot of desire to express, irrespective of the economic, social strata that we live in. Graffiti is one example, and you know, there could be so many expressions that local, somewhere in a village, could find. We would with the kind of, and you know, Professor Dudrah talked about languages. Languages is not just words. It could be in so many ways. So for me, art is not just a traditional form of expression. It can come in any way. I'll give you a small example, very that I have personally witnessed, and I'm very proud of. You know, at the program that I run at IIM Ahmedabad, Creative and Cultural Businesses Program, it's for entrepreneurs, for the industry, but we also invite certain rural artisans, for example, in the same program, alongside the industry participants, with no special privileges or you know, no mollycoddling of anyone. Same delivery, no compromise in the delivery of education or the learning outcomes. We ensure that the learning outcomes are complete. I'll give you an example. One of the girl weavers from Kutch, from a small village in Kutch, who was making in a single loom in her home, you know, those khadda handlooms. She was making scarves. And she came to the program. At the end of it, she changed her model altogether. She discovered the poet in herself, ended up converting all the weaving she was doing in expressing what she was seeing, the landscapes, the horizons, whatever she was inspired by, in form of wall art. She was taking waste yarn, converting that into some beautiful art forms, selling them at 6,000 and 9,000 rupees. I have two pieces hanging right across from where I am sitting, and they're absolutely beautiful. They could be hanging anywhere. So it doesn't, what I mean is, it's not about social or economic strata we belong to. I think it's just inspiring, calling, and connecting yourself to the culture, to the roots, finding your own unique voice. Expressions are not a problem. Arvind, that's my firm view.
I agree with you, Anchal. In fact, before we really hope we have some questions there. You know, what you just said, my childhood memories came back to me. I do not know whether you have been to Meerut when you were a bit younger ever in the UP.
I was born in Meerut, Arvind.
Okay, so you know, Nauchandi, what I'm going to talk about.
I grew up there.
Well, what a coincidence. So I studied there as well at St. Mary's, by the way, which catch up some other time. But you know, at Nauchandi Mela, I was just thinking about as a child. It was inclusive. It was for all strata. It was late in the evening and the night, so that after you've done your daily chores, whatever you have to do, you can go and enjoy. There were a variety of performances and performers. There was handicrafts. There were artists. There were you know, jugglers. I mean, you know that if you have been to, if you remember Nauchandi, maybe one way, and I think we should work on this somehow to see, can we not create such traditions of a Nauchandi equivalent fair in various parts of India, which engage people for a period of a couple of weeks' time at least, in a manner which is so different than actually just only a Surajkund Mela, which is nice, but limited in its approach as such there. But yes, inclusivity is possible. We have some examples to do so. Kaustav, do we have any questions?
No, we don't have any questions yet, not yet. We haven't had questions yet.
Okay, so I think we still have about a few minutes or 6, 7, 8 minutes to continue our conversation there. Let's look into.
I mean, I'd like to give another example of when I talk about just people need anyone. They just need means of expression. Just opportunities, and how commerce and pure form arts can actually come together. And you would, I'm sure, be aware of the initiative that, for example, Jaipur Rugs does with regard to their Manchaha range of rugs, where they just permit the local women artisanal weavers in different villages around Rajasthan to weave into their rug whatever they desire, whatever is coming to their inspiration. And the results are quite phenomenal, frankly.
Very good. So, Anchal, let's come to now a little bit more on the same subject in Rajinder. What I've seen, whenever I get a chance to travel overseas and I go to some museums, we'll come back to talk about museums. You see school groups, young children, very young children. Sometimes they could be just kindergarten children. They're being escorted and actually almost like having a day out there. Is there a practical suggestion you can give, let's say to serendipity? That look, you have a somewhat more elitist, and it's not no disrespect in any way. So there is a platform which is in Goa. You are trying to do something in a relatively affluent environment of Delhi and Gurgaon, where the center is going to be located. Is there some suggestion we can give? That how do we encourage school teachers and school children to actually bring children when they are very impressionable to at least start understanding and appreciating. Rajinder talked about embedding in curriculum. Great thought. Obviously, we need to do that. But immersion into appreciation. Is there anything you can recommend, Rajinder, from the West as to why they have been doing it for decades and why in India we hardly get to see something like this in our schools?
One of the exciting things that I always see about India now, I've been coming to India as a child, and before the COVID pandemic, every time I come, there's something new growing. Coming back to your point, Arvind, about wonderful architecture, wonderful designs, and yes, of course, there are malls and others, but aside from that, when we're thinking about the fabric of our buildings, the arts and culture, is there a way in which we can, from the start, involve the communities who are going to visit this? And I'm talking about generation of communities. So a school is a great example of partnering up with. Think about a school. The school will start off with young people as young as you said, kindergarten, so 6, 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 8 onwards, and that could last for 5, 10, 15 years. And so generations of children you could be partnering with, and their teachers and their parents and their communities. So as you're thinking about the design of buildings, you're thinking about the design of spaces, whether these are arts and crafts spaces, whether these are exhibition spaces, whether these are open auditorium spaces. Can you start engaging with these people from the get-go as a process of consultation? So that it's not an afterthought. We've made the building, and you come into the building and it's like, oh my God, this is a high society building. I need to make sure I put on a shirt, and I need to make sure I can speak the right language and I can walk the same way. So think about the actual fabric and designs of building, what the purpose of those buildings are, how they invite people in. You could have some wonderful interactions through workshops, through getting kids to design and draw. We're now in the 24/7 media age where people are on especially the Generation Zs and millennials and even younger than that, are on Instagram or on Twitter. And so these are quick and easy ways through hashtags in which to engage a wider populace, which a generation, certainly 15, 20 years ago, was very, very different. So I would say think about the kinds of communities that you want to engage with, not just, if you like, as a one-off event, but over the even 5, 10 years, the generation of your project, the generation of the building. How do you engage with these communities from the get-go? Is our building, is our spaces, are our events opening and inclusive? And by that I mean, are we in conversation with them? So it's not just that, you know, we have a Diwali or a Holi event and therefore we'll have something for the kids and the parents at one side. No, this is about thinking, how do the kids interpret Holi? How do the kids, or a different generation or a different sector of society, interpret Diwali? And it can cut across religion in all kinds of ways, it can cut across class and caste that we mentioned otherwise. So it's thinking, I think, slightly outside the box, but it's also thinking from the get-go of your projects, from the design of buildings, from what's happening in the buildings, who are we consulting with as possibly as wide as possible, and how well do we do that?
A wonderful point, Rajinder, because when you just talked about design of buildings, I'm reminded of one of the most interesting initiatives in education which I've seen in northern India. It is by the Shiv Nada Foundation. Roshni Nadar is leading that. They have this program called Vidya Gyan. It's not for me to talk too much about Vidya Gyan today. It's the most mind-blowing program which I know of from an impact point of view there. But one of their school buildings is in Bulandshahr, or near Greater Noida and Bulandshahr area, and I had the privilege to visit it some years ago. And what struck me was that even in terms of design of the building, this is for children which are joining the school from class 6 onwards. They come from the most underprivileged backgrounds, most underprivileged, and it's a miracle in terms of what transformation happens to them in the 6-7 years of the journey there. But design of space in such a manner which is interactive, design of space which is collaborative, design of space is somewhere where you experience learning as opposed to being taught about learning there. And that sort of resonated with the point you just made, that spaces have to be also conceptualized in a manner which encourage a multidisciplinary utilization, multi-purpose utilization as well. And some of those spaces could be made open and available to every strata of society, so that we don't have to think about only building museums and centers. There could be the spaces which are there everywhere, but can be repurposed or reimagined there. So great point what you made there. Anchal, how about any other things, you know, we can think about how to engage people at large? To me, that is the single biggest
I think
challenge.
Arvind, just to build on the earlier point, because it all ties back to how to engage all the strata of the society, be more inclusive. I'd like to remind everyone that some of the finest, the most iconic cultural movements have come from the underprivileged societies. Whether it's jazz, whether it's hip hop, whether it is the samba in Brazil, capoeira. I mean, these are really forms of very popular underprivileged living conditions, even where, as I began by saying that art is the ultimate form of hope. All of these actually gave them hope. It gave them identity, and they became so strong in the world. In fact, I would go on to say that popular cultures, mass cultures, underprivileged cultures have a larger possibilities of influencing the world than elitism. And we just have to encourage that. We just have to encourage local voices. Each one will come up with their own unique voices. We haven't seen those in India yet. But I think it's just a matter of time, and it's just giving the right shape, right opportunities, right encouragement to everyone. I think there can be so many possibilities rather than just asking them to perform the traditional forms. Just give them freedom to express however they want to.
Very good, Anchal. Rajinder, any closing comments? I mean, not that the three of us at least needed any kind of an alignment. I thought we already were passionate about the subject there. I think some interesting points have been sort of come up into our discussion here today, even though we didn't have any audience participation so far at least. But at least for me, it was a matter of great learning as well, some good thoughts. Would you like to put in your couple of closing comments, and then after that, Anchal, and then we'll close this session?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so just a couple of points there. One, I want to re-emphasize the importance of arts and culture to a developing, growing, healthy, democratic culture and society. Arts and culture is central to that and is important to that. So let's think about the imaginative, complex and innovative ways in which we can make that happen. Let's also thinking about resourcing, both financially but also in terms of materials, of our leaders of the future. So these are the young people, these are the people in the kindergarten, but these are also people who are on lifelong journeys. You know, it's not just all about young people, as important as they are. It's also about people who come late to arts and culture, perhaps after spending years in a different vocation and retraining or wanting to retrain and wanting to find about arts and culture. So let's think about this moment where particularly India and the Confluence Centre is thinking about this arts and culture centre. Think about who will be those leaders, the men and women from all the different stratas of Indian society, of all the different castes, of all the underprivileged, as also well-being and able-bodied. Let's think about disability here as well. So think about that whole range of human spectrum and who could be our leaders of the future. How well can we resource and train them to take forward some of these projects as best as possible?
Very good. Anchal, any comment from you?
I would just summarize it in one line, Arvind. I think our identity, our culture is the ultimate visa we need to cross borders through pure formed arts or more creative brands. I think for me, birth of creative brands, power to creative brands will come from our soft power. So they are not divorced from each other, they both need each other. And that's something I would like to emphasize. We need to really reconnect with our roots, harness that and find our own unique voices in whichever forms, whichever language, whichever currency we want to bring it to the world. The world is ready for us. I can guarantee that. I've seen this over my 34 years in and out of the country.
I agree with you, Anchal. In fact, it just reminds me of a very amazing, I've had multiple, like most of us would have had, experiences of meeting people in different parts of the world. The one which struck me the most, by the way, was I was in Mexico some years ago, and I don't speak Spanish. I had a guide with me. He was taking me around. I'd gone for some work as well. And all of a sudden, he talked about Slumdog Millionaire. And I said, okay, you know, I've heard about Shah Rukh Khan, I've heard about Amitabh Bachchan, I've heard about, of course, Raj Kapoor in the erstwhile CIS. But Slumdog Millionaire was relatively new, and this is a young guy. He said, you know, it gives me hope. I wanted to link to the art as the biggest form of hope. He said, in Mexico, our movies are very dark. They're depressing. Slumdog Millionaire gives me hope. And for the next 20-30 minutes, it was the longest drive we were having. I mean, I could see the joy in on his face. English was okay, but the fact that something built or shot in Indian context appeals to a young man in an environment maybe he was not seeing enough hope, and he sees this movie and it resonates with him that, look, for that period it gives me hope. So absolutely right that it doesn't need a passport, it travels everywhere else. It travels from outside into India and vice versa. And I just want to thank, we have a guest also who sent in a message, Bhavna. Bhavna, thank you very much for, we thought that it's only the three of us who are talking to each other. At least you put in a word there. So Thank you very much. I hope it has been worth your while to listen to us. If you have any questions from any one of us, do write us a mail through Kaustav and his team. We'll be very, very happy to engage with you. Kaustav, with this, I think we are just about at 5 o'clock. Should we call our session off now?
Well, we can always call our session off, but this conversation that we have started today is something that's going to stay forever. And we hope that this continues and a lot of more people start talking about this. This is, firstly, thank you so much, all of you, for making time today and, coming across continents to really present this and present this amazing point of view about creating this space of cognizance, interest, acknowledgement, and powered by a strong desire to express, and hopefully that can create an environment for appreciation of arts and culture in all of our lives. Of course, thank you again so much for all of this insight, your valuable insight, thoughts, and views that you shared with us today. Thank you, Arvind sir, for having built this panel, and I really thank Professor Rajinder Dudrah and Professor Anchal Jain, who have joined us from IIM Ahmedabad and the BCU, Birmingham City University, who are also partners for Conference Ideathon. Thank you so much again for your time. We're very sure the conversation that we had today, the points that were put across, would have immense value to all those who have attended this session or will probably be viewing this later as we upload the session on our social media channels. With that, we would like to conclude the session. Thank you so much again, everyone, for joining in from all across the globe who all are here with us, the audience and the panelists and mentors. Thank you again for your time. Have a great day.